All right, I know how to work this now. So hello everybody, my name is Hannah Mackintosh and I am a senior 2D artist at Cerebral Fix down in Christchurch, New Zealand. Cerebral Fix is a mainly work-for-hire studio, so this means we get to work on some really cool games for some really amazing companies right here in New Zealand and around the world. You may not have heard of us, but I'm pretty sure you would have heard of some of our clients. And here you can see the team. This is Cerebral Fix. As you can see, we're a pretty colorful bunch. At the moment, we're sitting at about 50 people in the studio, broken up into about 3 to 5 projects at a time. I am super lucky to be able to work with a bunch of super talented artists, developers, designers, testers, and more. And here's my team, or at least the artists that are on my team. It is an art process talk, so I'm going to be focusing on these fellas. So in New Zealand, we have the 7 artists, including myself, and overseas on the client side of the team, they have 4 artists and our art director. As a team, we work together to release content for a live game. One moment. There we go. It is working. Yeah, so now that you know a little bit more about myself and the project, I can start to go into the bulk of the processes that we use and the problems that we're trying to solve with it. And I'm actually really hoping that you guys didn't just hear my talk, be your best you by critiquing everything your workmates do, and think, man, this chick just must be an asshole. Yeah, I will admit there's definitely ways that you can approach critique and end up on the other side being the asshole. But my hope is that by the end of this talk, you'll be able to navigate critique in a more positive way that actually makes your team want to seek it out. All right, so before we go over the processes, it's very important we first go over why it's important. What are we trying to solve with this process? For my team, there are 4 main points we aim to tackle. The first one is we want to eliminate wasted time. Pretty sure this is something that most teams want to try and eliminate. The next thing we want to do is we want to make sure our art style remains consistent in the game. Super important for us because we have, as you can see, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 artists on the team. So it's quite a few people to make sure that we're all on the same page with the style. As you can see as well, our art director, she is also overseas, so we have to make sure that any time that we have with her is well utilized. And lastly, we want to make sure that we can grow our art team's skills in sustainable and efficient ways. This means making sure that everyone has plenty of support and feels respected at every level in the art team. So our project is actually just about to hit its 5th birthday. And in that time, we have done over 50,000 tickets. So for anyone who doesn't know what a ticket is, it's basically just our little briefs that tell us what we do for each task in the game. So we've done at least 50,000 tasks in this game to make it. So with this, we need a really good system to make sure we're not dropping the ball on anything. So we use a task management system called Jira. So here is a little kind of I can't show you the actual Jira board because I have a bunch of NDAs and they probably yell at me. But this is how it's laid out. We got a few columns. So we got the blocked, the to-do, in progress, ready for review, implementation review, resolved. Yeah, it seems like a lot, but it'll make way more sense as the talk goes on. And within this board lives tickets, which contain the briefs for our 2D assets. Once we want to start working on a ticket, we assign it to ourselves, and this signals to the other artists that we are working on it, and then we move it into the in progress column. Now, you might think that once we are finished with this ticket, we would do the next logical step, which would be to move it into the ready for review column. But we actually have one more secret step before this. So instead, we go into our special Slack channel, which is just dedicated to giving critique and feedback, and we post something similar to this. So what we want to do is we want to ping all the artists, so we'll put in @artfolk. Then we put a little description of what the ticket is, so cool art ticket. And then you'll give a link to the Jira ticket, so it's easy to find for the artist who's going to do the reviewing. So this sits in the channel, and then once an artist is free to give the review, what they'll do is they'll give that little tiny eyeball emoji, which signals to everyone else that they are in the review process. And what they'll do is they'll go into the ticket, have a look at all the links and stuff that are in there. So we like to post stuff like the link to the Dropbox where the actual physical assets and maybe some screenshots if it's relevant for the ticket. And then once they have their feedback, they'll go back to the original artist and they will discuss together the feedback, and once they agree on what they want to change and once it's changed, then that ticket who's doing the reviewing will go back into Jira and they will move it into the ready for review column for them. So we make it a general rule in our team that you cannot move your own tickets over. Only the artist who reviews the work can do that for you. This helps to create a better sense of team ownership on the project as we rely on each other to get things done. Yeah, and then to signal to the rest of the team that they have done this whole process, they put this little merge icon. I'm pretty sure it's some dev thing. Yeah, and then once it is in the ready to review column, that's when our art director oversees knows that it's her turn to have a final look over at it. Cool, sorry. Yeah, so hold on to your styluses because we don't just do this once, we do this 3 whole times for every ticket. And it does seem like a lot from just like an outside view, but trust me. So we split up into 3 stages. So the first one we want to do is a sketch phase. This is where we do a fast pass on how we expect it to look in terms of size, silhouette, shapes, and if it's important color. And then once that has gone through the review process, so you get one of your fellow artists to look at it, and then they send it over to the art director, and once everyone's happy, then it goes on to the creation phase, which is where we make it into a game-ready asset, and then it goes through the process again. You get one of your peers to review it, and then you get your art director to review it, and then we put it into the implementation phase, which is basically just to make sure we have not screwed up putting it into the game, which happens more than you think. Yeah, so it'll look like it's perfect on your screen. You go to the other screen, you're like, oh, let me fix this, please. And yeah, it looks like a lot. And it can feel that way on some days, especially when there's a deadline looming. You're like, oh, maybe I should just move this ticket myself. But I do not recommend that. Once you start dropping your processes, it's when stuff actually starts to fall apart. But you'd actually be surprised on how much time in the long run it does save us. As it, like with each step, we see greater leaps in our quality, and people just get better with each polish cycle, and we just get a better piece of art at the end of it. So I'm just going to show you a few of the kind of like examples of like what level of like sketching we do. So here you can see a little candle that I did a sketch for. It's mainly just lines. It's kind of just exploring the shapes and making sure it has a nice clear silhouette for when it's in game, because when it's in game it's quite small, so you need to make sure it looks good at a big and small size. So I didn't bother putting it into color because well, it's a candle, it's going to be waxy colored. And you can see above another candle that is in the game already, so I'm using that to help make sure I'm keeping up with the style while still kind of playing with the shapes to make it a new asset and interesting. And then we also have the Chocolate Santa, which does have color, which is just mainly because we want to know what kind of textures and stuff are going to be in this. You'll actually find that the sketch phase is really good for your newer artists to play around and learn your art style, as it has a lower risk to the project since they are designed to be fast passes and explore ideas. Yeah, and I'm just going to take you through one asset going through the whole process. Well, except for implementation, because that's kind of just is in game. So on the left, you can see the original sketch of the flower crown done by one of our artists. It's a pretty simple sketch with some flat colors to help show which bits are flowers and which bits are greenery. Yeah, so that went through our art process, and then we sent it off into the review column, into our art director's feedback, and she came back with this for us. Gorgeous. It's reading a bit too much like a wreath, though. So let's treat this like our other tiaras and just remove the bottom and add some leaves to balance it out. So this is really good, gave us some real good context on what we should do next, and she even provided a draw over, which you can see in the middle, to help direct us on what we should do and kind of just like keep the pace up. Yeah, and then the far right one is what it turned out in the end. So without the review process, we might have just gone for the first version, which by no means is a bad asset, it's still a good one. But by going through the polish cycles, it means that we get a much better asset that is closer to the style and will fit better in your game. At the end of the day, the process is about creating more focused opportunities for you to communicate in your teams and share ideas. This in turn encourages us to improve and push our art further than we could alone. Okay, to put into context, I'm going to show you what the process used to look like when I first joined. At a glance, it looks a lot simpler and streamlined. But the problem is that we only have one set of eyes on the asset before it's completed, and we're open to a lot more mistakes slipping through because of this. So worst case scenario, we might even have to redo the entire asset because we missed the mark, and it wasn't caught earlier, which we would have done in our sketch phase. Even just small mistakes add up and begin to take up more and more of your art director's time that they could have been using to help just like improve the art and like just make your game better. They're just trying to get to an acceptable level, and this can also have the effect of mistakes can also lessen the confidence your art director or your client has in your team's abilities to work, especially if it's the same small mistakes coming through every time. Like say you're just like forgetting the same shadows every time. It's like, well, this is kind of just like useless feedback to keep on giving. And it can make them have less trust in your team's abilities, and they're going to put much more scrutiny in the work and be less receptive to your own ideas to improve it. So this is my own tragic example of this. This is the infamous stone dragging, which is one of the first assets I did when I joined the team initially. So I really wanted to challenge myself, and I got really excited for this asset. So I did a bunch of research, went into the game, found a bunch of reference, spent a bunch of time, made it look real good, and I was super proud of how it turned out, and I still am. And my art director really loved it too, until she gave me the feedback that it needed to be rotated 90 degrees. So this is what it looked like after my feedback round, but I could have caught this in the sketch phase if we had the current process then. And to be fair to her, she was real gutted about it too. She's like, I am so sorry, but yeah, because you can't just turn a 2D asset around. It's a complete redo. I mean, I got away keeping the base, but I don't think I got anything else out of it. And it's still it turned out really nicely the second time anyways. I probably got better at it. I did that. But I was actually just really lucky that we weren't in a stage in the game where there was a really close deadline that mistakes like that can really be detrimental to your projects. Because it means that time you spent on that can no longer be spent on other things, so then other things have less time to them, and your quality bar is going to keep on dropping. So that's why we have the sketch phase. All right, and actually the final piece of our puzzle is that we actually encourage everyone on the art team to review. Actually, we even encourage, depending on the asset, some of the wider team to review, depending on what it is, like implementation. They often will get a chance to review since it doesn't have to be an artist. And we do this regardless of how long they've been on the project, so it doesn't have to be a senior artist that does this. I found it's been the best way to share knowledge between the team at every level in our art team. For one, your newer artists will get direct support and feedback from established members, make it easier to onboard onto the project. And the learn actually goes both ways, because you will often find that your new artists are able to teach your established artists new things that are different from our usual ways of working. They don't have a routine yet, so they don't have their set way of doing things. So it helps us stay current in new features and techniques. It also gives the team permission to give and receive critique. This is actually one of the best things I think about this process, because feedback is a way easier to take on when you're expecting it. And it's much easier to separate yourself from your personal feelings on the art if you know that you're going to be getting it. I don't know if anyone's an artist here and you're super proud of your work and you're about to hand it in. Someone's like, oh, you should have done this. And you're like, do I take this on? Yeah, so yeah, you want to make sure too, if you see something cool, you can ask them how they did that. It's a great way, especially if you're new and you're like, oh, that's super cool. I don't know how you did that. Can you show me? And it creates a time space where it's acceptable to ask that question because it's your feedback time. So it adds it into your process. And it's great for that, because I know everyone's always thinking, oh, we'll just do it if we have time. But if you make time for it, it's already there. Yeah, and you'd actually be surprised at how often even our most senior artists learn some cool new tricks from the new artists. And these little processes even get shared out within the team in a more organic way. So you're sharing the knowledge more evenly, and you don't have to figure out that someone's been has this crazy new just shortcut that just changes your whole process. And you're I didn't have to spend 3 hours doing this. You just did it in 2 seconds. Definitely had those before. And it also saves our art directors time to just focus on pushing the art and keeping it true to the style. They don't have to spend time giving the same little critiques that just get it to acceptable. It just pushes the art to be bigger and better. although be careful not to get too out of scope. Yeah, so in my last section, which is probably a very important section as well, is I'm just going to go over what makes good critique. Because as I said earlier, it's very easy to come across as an asshole when you give bad critique. Or not necessarily bad, just like not well delivered critique. This whole process falls over on itself if your team isn't given appropriate and empathetic feedback to each other. Remember, it's not about proving you're the better artist or you're not telling them off. It's actually about growing our skills together and sharing knowledge. Yeah, so this will be a quick look, but I recommend in your art teams, you all sit together and actually discuss what is good feedback to you and the different ways that you prefer to get feedback. Yeah, so very important, critique the art, not the person. You're unlikely to see any growth between team members if they're fearing the next attack on their art or themselves. You also want to make sure that you are being clear on what is direct feedback and what is suggestion. So instead of saying something like the color is wrong, you could say, this color is quite dark, so why don't we try brightening it up because it will create a more happier mood. Yeah, but also make sure that you provide room so that they can give you their own context, because there might be an important reason for the artistic decision. And yeah, if you're going in circles and you can't decide who to go with, like on feedback, make sure you have some source of truth. So in our team, it's our art director, but it could also be something like a style guide. I mean, you should be referring to your style guide anyways, but. All right, so here's an example of some bad critique. So this is my very special perfect Santa Claus, perfect chocolate Santa Claus. So if you were to give me critique on this in a way that I would say probably is bad critique, you could say, this chocolate Santa sucks. You did a terrible job. So this is just kind of mean to me, and I'm immediately going on the defensive because there's not really much to go on for this. You don't give me any context of why it sucks. You just told me I did a terrible job, so you're putting the blame on me, and you're probably going to get people who just will turn off to this feedback. And even if you don't turn off to it and you try to find what it was that was making it suck, you're just wasting time and going in circles trying to find out what it is. So if you do find yourself on the end of some feedback like this, because sometimes you'll find that people just don't have, they don't know artistic terms very well, so they'll try their best, but you're just like, oh no. you're like, can you give it more pizzazz? I will try. So yeah, if you find someone asking you to give it more pizzazz, I highly recommend you ask them some more questions. Try to pull out what exactly it is that is wrong with it or that can be improved to make it a better asset. So here's the same chocolate Santa, but we're going to give it better critique this time. So the artist reviewing this could say, we should relook at the shape because when we put it into a game at a smaller size, the silhouette doesn't read very well. So this feedback already has a way more context on it. I have a better idea of where I went wrong and what I can do to improve it. Yeah, it just gives me enough information to do the next step and improve it, and you're not wasting time trying to figure out what's wrong with it. They also didn't just tell me I suck, so that's also a bonus. And yeah, and you also want to make sure that maybe it looks like this because my art director gave me the sketch, which she did. As a joke, and it wasn't actually the thing she wanted me to draw. But I drew it anyways. Yeah, and one of the things I feel like a lot of people forget is that when you give critique, you can also give positive feedback, because positive feedback is also feedback. If you see something you like, let them know. It's such a great morale booster, and it encourages your team to keep on doing that. Like, if it's something that's good, you want them to keep on doing that good thing. You'll also find that your artists will be more confident in their own skills. It is way harder for imposter syndrome to set in if you are giving them positive validation on their work. But make sure it's sincere. Super important, make sure it's sincere. If you're just doing it to avoid hurting their feelings, you aren't helping them grow, and you're actually doing them a disservice. And if they pick up that you're not being sincere, they're not going to trust anything that is positive in the future. And that is something that is really hard to regain, is that trust. once you break that, it's really hard to get it. So make sure you're sincere in all your feedback. So with that saying, I'm going to show you how I would give critique on myself. Thanks for giving this a go. We should look at the shape because when we put it into the game at a smaller size, it doesn't read very well. The color choice was spot on though, so we'll keep using that with the new version. So the positive additions to this just make it a lot more kind of lighthearted. It's like, you'll see, like, I should have mentioned this on the slide before, but like even just some of my language, like saying we should relook at this, so I'm making it our problem. I'm not saying it's your problem, it's our problem. We're working through this together. So being really choice in your words that you're using is really important too. Yeah, I'm being sincere. I'm saying thanks for giving it a go, but there's some stuff to do. So like you're kind of anticipating the next thing is probably going to be something I'm going to ask you to change. But yeah. Yeah, that's what it actually looked like in the end. So I'm not saying that that particular critique would have given you that, but maybe it would have. Yeah, so I'm just have a few final notes. These are just a few disclaimers because not every studio is built the same. I don't expect them to be. You should all be finding your own processes that work for you, but I'll just tell you some of ours. So at our studio, Cerebral Fix, we have a pretty flat structure. The lack of formal hierarchy helps our artists feel at ease giving each other critique, as we all have similar responsibilities. I still think this process could be implemented in some form for studios that have a little bit more hierarchy, but you'll just have to be a bit more mindful on how everyone gives and receives critique, because like I always think that you have a really good critique culture if your most junior artist can critique your most senior artist without any fear that it's going to impact their job. Yeah, so on that note, make sure your review process is a safe place. If the process starts to devolve into an unhealthy, hostile environment, at any point, it's important to address it as soon as you can. Communicate with your team and find out where something's going wrong. Maybe someone has not been using like the right language and terms. Maybe they might not even realize it. So it's important to talk with your team. Like, if you take anything from this, just talk with your team, please. Communicate. It solves so many problems. Like, you don't want gossiping and stuff going on in your team. That's not a healthy thing. You want to make sure everyone can bring up problems when there are problems. And yeah, giving and receiving critique takes some time to learn. So give them time to learn. And lastly, this process was not created overnight. We had a lot of iteration time on this team to get it right for us, and I fully expect it to evolve with us as we continue to grow. I found the best way to look at processes in your team is to think of it as your own Frankenstein monster. So you chop and change your different processes based on what works for your team and what you like. And as soon as it starts to fall apart and it isn't quite working for you, just chop it off and add a new arm. Cool. Yeah, so do we have any questions, or do I go to the seat?
Yeah, sorry. Hello. Thank you, sir. Round of applause, Feta. Yeah, join me down there. We've got a couple of questions. Fantastic. Thank you so much for your talk. We've actually had quite a few questions come through. First off, and they're still coming. Fantastic.
Okay. First off, if it's anything to do with what the project is, I cannot say sorry.
No, I think we've got some really cool things, although some hard to answer questions, I imagine. How do you find team seniority affects the efficiency of the review process? For example, does a more senior team member need less review?
Well, you'll definitely see that, when it gets to the final stages, going to the art director, you get a little bit less feedback the longer you've been on the project, because it's kind of the nature of it. You get more familiar with the thing. I actually find the hardest thing is when we bring on new artists onto the team, especially if they haven't been moved from another project, they're a new hire as well. Having them figure out what the seniority is, because we have a very flat structure, so we don't have I called myself a senior artist there, but that's only because I've been there for so long. But in the workplace, we don't say, oh, that's the senior artist, so I need to listen to Hannah kind of thing. So a lot of people don't realize that when they first come in. So it can be a little bit difficult, but it's just more, you got to communicate, like, say, like, hey, yeah, everyone can do
Fantastic.
this.
How does one avoid sounding patronizing when giving positive feedback?
It's kind of like a personality thing, right? Practice? Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm a pretty nice person anyways, so I don't have any trouble with it, but. Oh, that sounded really, did that sound patronizing? Maybe I don't know the answer.
Sometimes feedback doesn't click or get understood properly. How do you approach reshaping feedback so that it clicks with a person?
Yeah, I feel like most people will, like, when you feel like it's not clicking like that, what's usually missing is your context. So trying to figure out, well, maybe like maybe you've given context, but it's the wrong context. Like really going back to your style guide or your art director and finding out what is really important to this piece of art. Like, for example, maybe someone's saying that it doesn't look polished enough, but then maybe the context that you need to have is, hey, this thing's going to be on screen for 3 seconds. It's fine.
Fantastic. Do you have any advice on giving critique on an artist who is stubborn?
Ooh.
A lot of knowing.
Yeah, I found that usually when an artist is stubborn, a lot of it is that they have trouble taking away their personal feelings from their art. So at the end of the day, it's kind of up to that artist to slowly kind of be able to take it away, but just giving them support to figure out how to do it, like making sure you're using language like saying we, like you're both tackling the problem together. You're not putting it on just like all their shoulders to do. Just kind of work through it and make sure you let them know that you're not attacking them as a person. You're just trying to help improve their art and just like talking it through. Like if they're upset about something, ask them why they're upset about it.
Fantastic. How do you know when it is a good time to give feedback and when to hold off so that it's received well?
Well, if you have a great process like our one, you always expect it at a certain time because you're actually asking for it once you put it into the review channel because you're signaling to everyone that, hey, I'm ready for feedback. Like, we do sometimes still have, like, we'll give, like, each other little tiny bits as we're working on stuff too, but that's more suggestion-wise. We don't normally do any really big ones unless it's something that's, like I'm real great at forgetting shadows on my thing, so people will just be like, hey, you forgot shadows, and I'm like, thank you. So yeah, having like set times where you're giving each other feedback is really helpful because that's actually probably a good thing to have for the previous question is if you're expecting feedback, it's easier to take yourself away from the art because you have put yourself out there to get feedback, so you're expecting to get it.
Fantastic. Oh dear. I think I accidentally scrolled down too far. And last question, how would you provide feedback to someone who is particular, anxious, or critical of themselves or their work?
Yeah, like I've definitely had times where like one thing I see especially with new hires and artists when they're just starting out is they don't have the self-confidence in their work yet and like they don't know like kind of what the level you're looking for. So like you'll see them spend like a bunch of time on it and they only show you it once it's really finished, which I want to see that at the earliest stage. I want to see those sketches. But I'm sorry, I've forgotten the first part of the question.
How would you provide feedback to someone who is particular, anxious, or critical of themselves or their work?
Yeah, well, I think it's important to demonstrate it through your own actions too, like showing that you're seeking out feedback and critique, making it normalized kind of thing, making it so it's something that's just like what you do in your work culture. Like you're always looking to get feedback and stuff. And I think you won't probably immediately see it, but people will start to be a little bit more accepting of getting critique, and especially if it's done in a healthy way where everyone feels like they're being respected, their opinions are being respected.
Fantastic. Actually, I have a question myself as well. Do you have any suggestions for those who are preparing themselves for feedback as well? Are there any kind of common mistakes we make when we get feedback?
Yeah. I mean, the trickiest thing about feedback is that like this works really well if both people are on the same page and know how to do critique in healthy and respectful ways. But often you'll find that one side of the critiquer isn't maybe on board with everything. Maybe you have like, I mean, I work in work for hire, so I've definitely had times where like we've had a client and maybe we haven't had as much like person-to-person like contact, so we were kind of just seen as the workforce, so they don't really consider how their words are coming off. Yeah, so oh my god.
So
I get
in a
on
way,
tangent.
kind of just
Yeah.
don't take it to heart, I suppose.
Yeah, like understand, like take the moment to take yourself away from it and think, do they know how to give critique, and what can I do to better the situation? Like, say in that bad critique example, if someone just said like this sucks, try to find out what they're actually trying to say. Sometimes they will give you a reason that isn't actually why they think it sucks. Like they'll be like, this doesn't have pizzazz, but maybe it just doesn't have some of the things they wanted in it, like, or it has too much stuff in it.
Fantastic. I think that's all we have time for today. But Hannah Mackintosh, everyone, thank you.